I'm Erica Small-Cisco, Program Manager with the Women's Business Center, and I'd like to welcome everyone here today. This is the second session in our series, Resilient and Strong. It's our virtual women's series, and Nicole Weyer is our instructor, and she's coming to us from the West Coast. Last week, we spent time talking about or sharing information about how to, let me go back to my notes here. I'm so sorry. Last week we talked about what we can do to really overcome some of our fears, our anxieties. We spent time really talking about working together to get through this COVID-19 pandemic, and try to really have an interactive discussions to encourage each of us, and also to encourage us to share so we can learn from each other's experiences. So today we're going to talk about identifying lessons of COVID-19. Even though we're identifying lessons of COVID-19 today, it's probably going to come up in each of our discussions over the next, over this weekend going forward, because it's something that we're continuing to recover from and learn from. Just behind the scenes, I just like you to know that Tasha Sanders is, she's going to be our driver, so she's host, and she'll be handling the slides, the breakout sessions, and then this week, Deborah Giddens is also on. Last week, everyone went into their breakout sessions, and we kind of stayed behind and let the groups meet by themselves. But we discussed that one of us is going to try to join in at least one of the discussion groups, so we can help manage the time and then make sure that everyone has the opportunity to get a chance to share, since those breakout sessions go along so quickly. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, and she's going to talk about identifying lessons from COVID-19 and what to carry forward.
Thank you so much, Erica and Deborah and Tasha, and good afternoon and welcome to everyone who's joining us today. I am thrilled to be facilitating this series, and really enjoyed last week, and I'm excited to be here again this week. So Erica and Tasha and I were engaged in dialogue several months ago about putting together a program that would really help support business leaders and business people as we honestly navigate COVID, because what we know is that it showed up as an uninvited house guest and it's still here. And it has been absolutely extraordinary times that have brought challenges, opportunities, moments of both awe and confusion into our lives. We know that 2020 has already revealed itself to be a year that each of us will remember, and honestly, for some pretty different reasons. What I keep coming back to is 2020 is really a year of choice. And some of you heard me say this last week. It's an opportunity for us to identify, do I lone wolf it? Do I go it alone? Do I try to figure out how to have all of the answers and all of the guidance and all of the strategies? Or can this also be an opportunity to really link arms with other people that are either in my similar marketplace, have a similar business, or just with other human beings and other professionals, and say, how can we do this together? So this series was really born out of those conversations. And today is a pretty important conversation for us to have in light of, again, what's happening with COVID in this country and where we are. Because if we don't give ourselves a few moments of pause along the way to say, where am I now? What am I learning? How do I step out of that ground level view that we all have to function on? How do I step up to maybe 5,000, maybe a 10,000 foot view and say, what's working, what isn't, what's sort of working, but what's a little bit bumpy? then we're missing an opportunity for us to be in best service to our customers, to our clients, to our team members, and to our communities. So today is all about taking that opportunity for reflection on what over the past 5 months have meant to you as a leader, as a team member, as a business owner, and as a colleague. What have we been learning? What is some of the wisdom and some of the strategies that we've learned on our own, or honestly that we observed other people learning as well? What are the obstacles that are still in my path? What will I do differently going forward? So this is really designed to be a conversation. And in order for us to reach that goal, it means that when you have, if ideas or things that I am sharing or somebody else shares hit home for you, let's have a really active chat today. Put things in those comments. If something makes sense, you know, kind of use your favorite emoji, give it a thumbs up. We're looking for engagement. We're looking for dialogue, because what I know is true is that there's tremendous and deep wisdom in this room with us right now. And we can hold it to ourselves, or we can come from this place of curiosity and wonder and sharing, which leaves us all better at the finish line in about 40 minutes. So today is all about engagement. It's all about having a conversation. And the first thing that I'd really be interested to hear is, and drop this in the chat, please, what inspired you to sign up for and attend this conversation today? Because I think we're probably all here for some different reasons and maybe looking to get something different out of it. So again, what brought you here today? And then, as we have some of that information coming into the chat, I want to extend an invitation before we really dive into the nuts and bolts and the nitty-gritty of our time together. And that is to really come at these conversations and at these discussions and at these ideas from a place of non-judgment and curiosity, and wondering, how could this apply to me? Being curious about, could that work in my business? And also being non-judgmental with ourselves, because we've all had an incredibly unique experience with COVID. And however we go forward and whatever the rest of 2020 looks like is also going to be an experience that is uniquely ours. So to support this idea of us kind of being non-judgmental and sometimes getting out of our own way, in her book, The Rise, Creativity, the Gift of Failure, and the Search for Mastery, Sarah Lewis talks about what psychologists call the Einstein Effect. And it is this: the cost of success is that it can in fact block our ability to see when what has worked well in the past might not any longer, and how our own bias can limit us as leaders because we're unable to see another way of doing things. So when we talk about curiosity and wonder today, it's really about, does someone have a strategy that might work for their very specific niche? What part of that might apply to my own business? What part of that can apply to me and my work in service to my clients or with my team or even in my own community? Absolutely. So I'm going to ask Tasha to go to our next slide, please. And we are diving in. Good afternoon, Lanika. Wanting to learn from others how they learn to focus and advance in their projects. That is going to be part of our conversations, and thank you for adding that comment in. So here's our roadmap. We're going to do essentially three things. We're going to look at where we were pre-COVID. We're going to look at where we are right now. And then we're going to be forward thinking. We're going to start to think about where we're going and what we want to carry forward from some of the lessons that have been so prevalent in our experience so far. So, Tasha, if you can advance the slide for me, that would be lovely. Our first task is this pre-COVID assessment, right? So when you think back to the opening of 2020, you think back to January and February and even early March, right? These are my questions. It's time to start to do a little bit of reflection, dust off the cobwebs from the early part of 2020. because part of that reflection time, it is also an opportunity for us to be pretty radically honest with ourselves. In order to create a path forward, we have to understand and figure out where we've been and where we are. With the daunting nature of COVID, it can be difficult to recall what actually was going well in the start of the year. What was I even doing at the start of the year? How was I functioning? It can be difficult for us to really remember what we've done well, what was already successful and in place in our organizations and in our businesses, and also what was thriving prior to these shelter-in-place orders and when our uninvited guest of COVID decided to stay. So here's what I would ask us to start to think about. And this is a place where, as I talk through some of this, if some of it hits home, put some of your responses in this chat. So what's brought some other people here today is starting a nonprofit, trying to learn all I can. Good for you. Way to be courageous in starting a nonprofit, and way to be courageous to look at doing it during this time. Congratulations. Michelle's wanting to learn from the conversation about what others are doing to move forward with COVID. Michelle, you're in the right place. That's exactly what we are thinking about right now. That's exactly what our focus is. How do we, and this is the brain trust nature of our time together today. What are other people doing? How are they functioning? So as we start to do this pre-COVID assessment, everyone, think about it in this way. And we want to think about what was working. So January and February and even March, what was working well in your business pre-COVID? Could it be the team that you were part of and that you were leading? Was that team communicating, supporting each other, problem solving, getting into some heavy debates, but really working through that well? So maybe the team that you're part of or the team that you are leading was just clicking along and really thriving. Could one of the things that was going well be the clients that you were serving? Did you feel absolutely prepared to meet them where they were, deliver whatever your service is to them in a way that was value added, beneficial, and supported them in reaching their goals? Maybe you were in the point in your business or the organization that you're part of that your client base was growing. You had an established referral network because based on the work that you're doing. Maybe it was the rapport that you had with them and how you were engaging them that was really starting to contribute to some of the success you were having in your organization. Is potentially something that was going well the marketing and sales functioning in your organization? And if it was, what was the strategy that you were using or that someone in your organization was using, and how did it serve you with the lead up to shelter in place? For some of you, one of the things that may have been going well in the organization that you're either leading or part of could be the financial stability of the organization. They had a great balance sheet. There was an awful lot of job security. The business was thriving. You may have been in a position where you were turning away business, right? Or may have been in a position where suddenly those gates were open and you were having a lot more inquiries that were actually converting into enrollments and converting into business for you. Is it possible that one of the things that was going well for you pre-COVID, pre-shelter in place, was your level of inspiration and motivation about the work that you were doing? How you were growing, how you were leading, how you were contributing to the mission, contributing to projects, contributing to the deadlines, and all of the functions of your organization. So when we think about and we take this moment to say, what was going well in my professional life, in my business, in my organization, January, February, and March, it definitely could be one of the things that I have spoken to, or it could be something else. So whatever it was for you, please put that into the chat and let's get a sense of where we were prior to shelter in place and prior to an abrupt shift in all of our planning, or at least in most of our planning. Tasha dropped in an article for everyone that comes from Thrive Global, the Thrive Global newsletter. And it really speaks to why women in the workplace create healthier companies. It's another one of those easy reads. It's also a really helpful reference when we start to think about, and what our author tells us, what Pat Waters really talks about is when we bring our full self into our workplace, that can have an impact on the culture. And bringing our full self also means the things that are going well, but it also means some of the struggles that we're having. It means that we can show up professionally and still bring our full selves into our workplace. So that might be an important link for you to either click on now so it shows up in your browser for later, or even to just take a screenshot of and to copy. So we've got Braden, high school teacher. Yes, your clients are your students. And you were doing PD in your school district. Okay, join today to learn how to continue to help and lead. So you had a pretty significant shift with COVID. You went from being in a classroom, being face-to-face with your students, to something that you may or may not have been prepared for. Absolutely. So prior to COVID, planning remediation for our students to prepare for English SOLs. So had all this planning in place, right? Had done all this planning, had, I'm sure, a pretty thoughtful scope and sequence for your lesson plans to really make sure that they are prepared.
I was literally in the middle of remediation using my smart board when the little notice came up from the governor saying schools were shut down, and my teenagers, a lot of them seniors, were like, what? School's out? I'm like, oh, okay.
Absolutely. And they were probably looking to you even in that moment for answers and for guidance. What does this mean about graduation? I mean, and they had a host of questions, and you're in this position to say, those are fantastic questions, right?
Exactly. And since I provide remediation for the whole school, when it comes to English SOLs, the reading and the writing, teachers were looking at me, guidance counselors looking at me. The governor didn't call me and ask. I don't know.
Right. And so it's this opportunity that presents itself where we can either kind of shut down, or we can just say, how in the world do we continue to go forward? Thank you. Sarah, over the past year, our team at the museum, strengthening relationship with your community and constituents. Yes. And I would imagine, Sarah, were some of those efforts to strengthen those relationships obviously in-person events? I would guess that some of it would be. And so you have this outreach, and you have all of these plans potentially to bring people in, to bring people to the museum, to see it, to have that experience, to create that resonance of what it's all about. And then again, we have the announcement from the governor that says shelter in place. So suddenly you're in this position where I am sure, I'm pretty confident that a lot of those events were postponed, or you tried to do them virtually.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely.
So how was it in those initial weeks when a whole lot of things were planned and suddenly everything had to be adjusted? How did that go?
So thankfully, those relationships that we built, those folks were, for the most part, very understanding of the fact that we just had to put on the brakes very fast and very hard. And we, our team just took a lot of effort to ensure that we continued to communicate on a regular basis with folks, and just did it in new and different ways. And so fortunately, the team at the museum, between our interpretation and our programs folks, after that first month blow sort of passed, we were able to get us up and running with online programs, member exclusive programs, behind the scenes, of course, online blogs and things like that. So they were very understanding. And the part that's been really amazing to me is not only do I, of course, miss our members in our community, but I hear so much all the time, we miss you and we can't wait to be back with you again. And so it's just that reciprocal, that two-way relationship right now. And so for that, I'm grateful. And I just hope we can maintain that and sustain that through all of this, for sure.
Well, I'm also imagining that that is really sustaining right now, because to now hear reflected back to you, thank you for your work, we really appreciate you and we miss you, means that you're living your mission and you're reaching your objectives. You're creating that connection. You're creating that resonance with the museum where people say, oh, this is a place that I want to visit. These are people that I want to engage with. This is an experience that I want to have. So
Yeah.
fun. And it'll be interesting. I'm going to be interested. We're going into our first breakout group next. That's really going to give us a chance to talk about where we are now. So if anyone else has any other comments about what was going well pre-COVID, when we think about, again, January, February, March, what were some of the things that were either maybe just starting to come together or had really taken off? Because as we spend some time thinking about where we were pre-shelter in place, it also gives us now a beautiful frame of reference to go back to in the third part of our conversation today. So as we move to the next slide, as I kind of mentioned a little bit, we're going to go into our first round of breakout groups. And that's to talk about, where are we today? Where are you now? And so when we look at this stage of COVID, which is honestly different across the country. I just recently moved from Hampton Roads. I'm now in Oregon, and they have far fewer cases. They're really centralized into a couple places in the state. So they're managing a little bit differently here, not 100%. But as we look at where you are now, I'm going to ask you to think about these three things and see if you kind of fall into the A, B, or C bucket. A could be stuck, uncertain, almost or completely paralyzed with my business or my professional life. Like, what am I doing? You might be in the B bucket, which is things are just starting to get going again, and you're becoming really hopeful about, okay, we've got some momentum back. We're in whatever phase of reopening we are in, because that's different for every single one of us on this call today. We're all at a different stage of reopening and kind of spreading our wings in our professional life and in our businesses, based on what that business is. Might you find yourself in this C bucket, and that is seeing COVID as an opportunity and businesses really picking up. So I invite each of you to think about where you are in terms of this stage of COVID. And then also to really respond to what are some things your business has done to press on and gain momentum. So what Tasha is going to do, because she is masterful, she's going to put everyone into groups of 3, and each person will have about 2.5 minutes to really talk about where you are right now and some things that your business that you're leading or part of is really doing or continues to do to really move forward. So we're going to be in those groups for about 8 minutes. I will encourage you to have one person who's a timekeeper, just to make sure that we're kind of on track. And we're going to put you into random groups, and then we're going to come back. I would also invite you to maybe take a screenshot so you understand kind of and have in front of mind the questions that you're going to be answering. So Tasha's going to work her magic, and you guys are going to head into some groups, and then we're going to see you back here in just a few minutes. Back from that session and interested for some feedback. What were some thoughts on that conversation? Maybe what did you learn about other businesses? Any insights that you had from listening to other people? Or maybe did you hear yourself in someone else's voice when they were speaking to where they are right now? Or maybe some of the strategies that they have been using. Interested to see how that went for folks. All right, I know we've got some folks that are typing, so that's great. We are going to move on to an action step that comes after this breakout group. So if Tasha wants to advance our slide, that would be, I would love that. And so part of where we've been is already starting to think about, okay, January, February, and March, where were we? Where did we start? And then taking some time together to say, where are we right now? And obviously, inevitably, some of those conversations go to where am I headed next? What's coming up for me next, which is obviously important. But an action step that can help us move forward and keep us going is to think about and reflect on something that was working well pre-COVID in our business that we want to bring back now. So what is something, if you started thinking at the very beginning of this conversation, wow, this was really taking off. We had these many new clients. Here was a strategy to really get those clients. Here was an initiative that we were working on. And then because of COVID, everything, we pushed pause for a significant amount of time. Where are we now? So that's the action step for this week. That's the action step for now. What was working then? And what do we now want to reintroduce wherever we are in this process of spreading the wings and either reopening our businesses or kind of opening in a new way and going to this next phase? Fantastic. So the next step after that will be to really start to think about some of the lessons that we have learned. So if we want to advance this slide, that would be great. Oh, I'm sorry you're having problems with your internet, Lucy. I'm hoping you can at least hear some of this and it's not kind of going in and out. There might be, I'm hoping it's a blip, we'll say that. So again, if we look at what our roadmap was, where were we? Where are we now? But it's also now starting to put on these glasses to really think about COVID and what are some of the lessons that we learned, right? Because each of us in different ways have gained a significant amount of information and data over the past 18, 19 weeks, right? We may not have recognized it as such in the moment, because one of the challenges that we as humans face is when we are in the middle of something, we can be right down at ground zero and we're right on the ground level. And it can be challenging to step back enough or to give ourselves ample time to step back enough to really figure out what in the world are we learning here? How do I take a moment instead of just plugging along? How do I find a couple moments to say, either this just went really well, or we're in week 3 of shelter in place, what's happening and what do I do? So our pause point right now is really to think about what were some of the successful adjustments that you made, either with your team, with your organization, which ones were successful and which ones served you then that are still serving you now that you're going to carry forward. So as you think about all of the different changes, and again, the word of the year, pivots, that all of us made in our organizations and in our professional lives, what of those served us really well? And it could be taking some of your business online, taking some of your events and programs online. It could be finding different ways to reach out to your constituents and your community and your clients. So as you start to think about what was one change that I made that was successful, put that in the chat and let's start to create this brain trust of, oh my goodness, this is what I did that really worked, because what worked for you, someone else might be able to borrow and tailor exactly to what they're looking for and what their needs are today. Because as I step back and start to reflect about COVID, it kind of comes into those 3 different buckets again, right? What were some of the adjustments that I made that worked? Some of them were showing up much more frequently and regularly on social media, finding different ways to outreach to my community. I used to send a newsletter every 4 weeks. Starting in March, I sent one every single week, just to stay in touch with my community, just to stay in touch with people and to give them information and hope and resources. And that built my community. That built my community in a way that I never would have expected. So for me, that's a successful adjustment that I'm going to continue to carry forward. So what are some of them for you? The second bucket, I think in COVID, if we're talking about kind of where we are, the second bucket can really be, you know, some things that I had an idea were going to be successful. They may have fallen a little, they may have been bumpy in my mind. I saw it as a really smooth process, as a really brilliant idea. It felt a little bit chunky. There were more struggles that came up with trying to start a blog, trying to move a program online, trying to figure out how to continue, you know, a business that is in kind of the restaurant industry. How can I try to do that? So some of it felt bumpy, but you saw some of those moments of, okay, it's working. It worked for a few days. Ooh, and then it was bumpy. And then it worked for maybe a week. And then it was bumpy again. So that second bucket is, what are some of those things that in our minds we're like, yep, this is going to work and I've got it. And then they were a little bit bumpier, but but you know that there's merit in that strategy. There's merit in that one pivot that you made, but what you need to do is polish it. So what are some things in that category that you want to bring your team together, bring your colleagues together and say, we think the idea has merit, just didn't quite turn out how we wanted it to. So now what we need to do is figure out how do we iron out the wrinkles. And then the third bucket that is very real for all of us are, and I could be the only person who has these ideas. There are days when I feel like I have an absolutely brilliant idea and I start it and it completely falls flat. And I think, I thought about it, it sounded great, it looked good on paper, and I tried it and it just absolutely went nowhere. There was no traction, there was no response, there was no nothing. And so might there be things for you in your business and the organization that you serve that might fall into that kind of a category? And here's the interesting piece, and here's the important consideration about those ideas that maybe didn't go, that didn't have any traction, where you didn't get the response. It doesn't mean that you are a failure. It is not tied to your success or your brilliance or your dynamism as a leader. It just means that in this time, it didn't work. It's easier said than done to approach it that way, but I think that's the piece of inner work that many of us need to do, because it can be hard when we have thought about something and it just does not materialize as we had anticipated. But what creates resilience, what helps us cultivate grit, what makes us stronger, is to be able to put a little bit of space between ourselves and that idea and not have it be a character assassination on ourselves. I can't believe I had this idea and it didn't work. It happens to every educator, every nonprofit leader, every CEO, every corporate person, every person who sits on a city council or a school board and does any kind of work, and anyone who's a human being. We all have ideas that we think are going to fly that simply don't. Don't let that be the deterrent for you to stop having the ideas and to stop engaging and investing in the effort, because that effort is what makes everything else happen. So Tasha dropped another article into, she put another article into our chat, which comes again from Thrive Global. And it's kind of a different perspective. This article really comes at it from this idea of how and why the current crisis could be a defining moment for us to become more resilient and more sustainable. Because of the extraordinary nature of the past 18 weeks, truly. It's very easy for us as human beings to go to this place of, this has just been really difficult, and to get stuck in that place. Visiting that place makes us human. Being stuck in that place can become problematic. So giving yourself the opportunity to think about, what did I do well? What was a good idea? What was a good initiative? I know it's got legs. How do I polish it? What are some of the things that I thought were brilliant, or that we as an organization thought were brilliant? They kind of weren't. So we're just going to leave those behind us, and we're going to leave them in our rearview mirror. So I think you'll find this second article quite insightful. It was an easy read for me that I found, and it was one that as soon as I read it, I was like, that might be one that I want to share with some other people. So what I'm going to ask folks to do who are in the room with us at this point is for everyone to share something that you learned about yourself as a leader, as a team member, or as a colleague since March, since the shelter-in-place orders began. What is something that you learned about yourself as a leader, as a team member, and as a colleague? And I'm going to look for those answers from all of you, and then we're going to go into our final breakout group.
Do you want us to put this in the chat or just?
You can just jump right in. Yeah, that's great. Go right in.
Okay. I learned how important it was for me to keep a positive spin on things. Because if I started freaking out to my colleagues, or if I started to show any sort of distrust in our leadership, then that just fueled the fire. But if I was encouraging and just focus on what we can control and what is good about what we're currently doing, then that seemed to be kind of like, water on the fire, kind of squelched it a little bit.
Yep. I love that. Thank you.
I think for me, it was about having grace and forgiveness with myself. In my small group, I shared that I have a 6-year-old home with me. And so I've had to do a lot of block scheduling with my days, and my to-do list doesn't always get done by the end of the day. And so just allowing myself to be flexible and being okay with picking up where I left off the next day, even if it didn't get all accomplished when I wanted it to get accomplished.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else want to share? If you're more comfortable, you are welcome to drop it in the chat. So we are going to go into, and it's a bit related about kind of what we learned about ourselves as a leader and team member, and but this is really a little bit more focused on kind of what we've learned about ourselves. And it's the Hindsight 2020 question. And I have found myself in this place frequently over the past several months. Wow. I wish, I wish I had known that then, right? Because it's the Monday morning quarterback piece. What I know now about myself that I wish I had known or embraced or even acknowledged earlier in the year. And what I would love to do is for folks to take a screenshot of this. We're going to go back into breakout groups just for a very short period of time. But before we do that, I want to share this one thought, and it comes from one of my very favorite radio programs on NPR has been a series called This I Believe. And it is, Margaret Sanger said this in one of her appearances in the 1950s. She said this: "This I believe, first of all, that all of our basic convictions must be tested and transmuted in the crucible of experience. And sometimes, the more bitter the experience, the more valid the purified belief." So she said this in the 1950s, and I was reading that again 2 days ago, and I went, that could be 2020. That could be 2020. What are we going to do? So I leave you with those thoughts as we go into our final breakout group. and ask for everyone to have about a minute to answer this question and respond to this. What I know now about myself that I wish I knew or embraced. March, April, or May. So Tasha's gonna work her magic, and if you can, identify a timekeeper to help keep us a little bit on track. And when we're done with that, we're gonna come back and wrap up our time for today. So Tasha, push those magic buttons. Nice. Okay, I wanna welcome everybody back, and we are going to, I'd like to see if there are anything anybody wants to share about that conversation that we just had. Anything that popped up like, oh, wow, here's what it was. I know I heard beginnings of COVID kind of being in this state of pause for a bit, and knowing that if another shelter in place happens, that's not the piece of it that we want to replicate. That what we really want to do is jump into this place of action and say, I've been through it once, I'm ready, and I now have a sense of what to anticipate. So Lucy, do you want to chime in for that? Because Lucy just showed up on our screens. Oh, she's coming. Okay, so we are going to work on concluding today. So if Tasha wants to take us to our final screen, that would be fantastic. And this is an opportunity for any kind of insights that you gain from our conversation today, either in a breakout group or through things that I have said, or through other things that people have put in the chats about where they are and where they want to go, and some of the struggles that they have really worked to overcome. So if there's something that you want to share that was helpful information, or part of the conversation that helped you join some of the dots in your business or in your life, put those in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and show up and share those with us. And as we give people a chance to think about and reflect on that and do a little typing or turn on their video and come in, Tasha has just dropped into the chat ways that we can stay connected. And if you're interested in staying connected with me and being part of my community at Root to Rise Coaching, she dropped a bit.ly in there that can help you sign up for my newsletter and to help us stay connected. There's also an opportunity to come back next week for our third session. And we're really talking about one of the most important things for all of us in every area of our lives, everyone, and that is boundaries. And it is one of my favorite topics because it's something that is so necessary. And we're talking about boundaries from the perspective of why they are so important, and honestly, how the boundaries that we set with ourselves and our personal and in our professional and community lives also can be an empowerment tool for everyone else around us. Because I know sometimes when we talk about boundaries, people have a kind of a visceral reaction and feel like a boundary means that we cannot pass go, and it's something that is almost punitive. And this is a conversation about boundaries as a source of empowerment for us, and also as a tool that helps us call other people in our lives to a better version of themselves. So I think we're also going to drop in the link if anyone wants to already sign up for next week. I know there's going to be some emails that come out about that. Thank you so much for everyone for being here today and for your participation. Thanks to folks who came in and had to leave early, and some folks who came in a little bit late. No worries, just grateful to have you in this space today, sharing our wisdom and putting our heads together. I wish you a beautiful Wednesday. Please stay cool, and I hope to see many of you back here next week. Thank you so much to Tasha and to Erica and to Deborah for being super helpful. And thanks, Sarah, for all of your contributions. And Tasha just put in the link to sign up for next week. And the other piece is, if this was a helpful conversation for you and you copy that link, share it with other people. We've still got space in this Zoom room for a bunch of other people to join us. It's a quick hour. It's a helpful conversation. Hopefully everybody has some different things that they take away on a weekly basis. So thank you so much and take good care.